Thank you for joining a unique interview that we're going to do right now. Usually I do something called Just Click Submit, which is encouraging writers to go find the best resources out there for writers. And it could be contests and products and so on and so on. Also, I do a lot of interviews that fall into the Industry Pro series, where we talk to people that are working in the industry and find out their journey and their goals and their philosophies and so on and so forth. We're going to do both of it today. So this is the Industry Pro / Just Click Submit as we welcome Steve Vitolo. Steve's a screenwriter who has written on Blackish, Hot in Cleveland, Crowded, and is co-writer of the soon-to-be-released rom-com The List. He's also CEO and co-founder of the screenplay and production software Scriptation. So there's a lot to talk about, including the screenplay contests that they host. So yes, we are going to be covering a lot of bases today. Steve, thanks for joining.
Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's just dive into your journey as a storyteller. I'm guessing for most of us, it started in childhood at some point. When did you find a connection with telling stories?
Well, when I grew up, I wanted to be a late night talk show host. I had Letterman. I had a black and white TV in my room, and that's how old I am. Or maybe
I'm with
maybe
you.
my parents just didn't want to.
Some of my first writing was writing monologue jokes for Letterman as a kid.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
I pretended to do that. They were
same
terrible.
Yeah, I would.
I would like go to school and read his top 10 list to people and things like that. But yeah, so I always wanted to do something in comedy, and I had friends that were funny. I wasn't the funniest of my friends, but I had friends that were funny, and we would write skits. And whenever there was a project that we needed to do for school, we were able to somehow convince our teacher to let us do a video project. And they would always, we would try and make them funny. And a friend of mine started writing slasher films when we were in middle school and in high school. Terrible, but it was good. We actually started filming them with our friends. So I always sort of had this kind of interest. And as far as comedy goes, I was a huge Seinfeld fan growing up. I had a Seinfeld website that, like, at the dawn of the internet was like one of the 5 websites that were online at the time. And it received actually a lot of notoriety when Seinfeld was going off the air in 1998. And I got a call from the Today Show. They wanted to interview me. I was in the St. Petersburg Times just for having this site. It was a Seinfeld fan site.
Sure.
So, and that sort of, like, I always had this tech and side to me as well, as we'll talk about later with Scriptation. But yeah, I just always wanted to write funny things and make people laugh and sort of explore that creative side.
Were your parents funny creatives as well, or were you outside the mold here?
My dad wanted to be an actor.
Okay.
And he actually fulfilled that dream when he retired. He was in an episode of Blackish.
Nice.
And he actually had a part in the movie that that's coming out soon. But yeah, so he always sort of had that side, but then he couldn't, he had to support his family and had to, get an actual job and support us. So he couldn't pursue that. But luckily, I was in a fortunate position where, I could go to college and learn some things and actually try and fail like 1,000 times in Los Angeles trying to be a writer.
So was college on the East Coast, or is that on the West Coast also?
I grew up in Long Island, and I went to Boston University, College of Communication. It's it was a top 10 school for film and TV. And it's, I learned when I came out here that the education that a lot of people get at USC and UCLA are like, you go to a sitcom writing class and it's the person that wrote on Everybody Loves Raymond. You don't really have that at BU, but there are a lot of people with really great connections. And when I moved out to Los Angeles, a lot of my friends, we were all sort of in the same boat, pursuing the same thing, working as production assistants and trying to work our way up. So there's a big BU contingency, and it's just good to have a lot of friends out here that you can sort of go through the same thing with.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you just immediately after college move to LA, or was there a
No,
transitional period?
I wasn't 100% sure I was moving to LA. I was trying to find jobs in New York, and it's like 1/100th of the job prospects that's in Los Angeles. But I stayed at home, and I worked this job that I'd worked with over the summer into a full-time job for a year, saved up a bunch of money, and then within like the first like 6 months, I like blew it all
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
well, I came into it very naive. I didn't understand that I would have a job and then not have a job and then have a job and then not have a job. That it's when you're a writer, it's a gig worker basically. And I even writers that are successful, they'll get staffed on a show and it'll be fantastic for let's say 20 weeks, and that's the contract. And then I've had friends that have been out of work for a year and a half, 2 years, and when you're doing that, in my position as a production assistant, and then working your way up as a writer's PA, writer's assistant, eventually script coordinator, um, it's great to be in those rooms, but you are still out of a job due to no fault of your own.
Right.
And that's I didn't kind of know that, and I don't know if I would have done anything differently if I did know that, but I sort of just went in and was like, I want to be a TV writer and I'm going to work my way up. And that's sort of all I know. And that's what I did. And I would say semi-successful in that.
Sure. Well, let's talk about what was your first outside of college. You're finally out. What was your first industry job?
I had, like I mentioned, I was at home for a year. So I had friends that were out here working jobs, and there were jobs, I guess, that they didn't want because they had already, graduated from like the shitty, like night jobs where you work from like 8 to 8 in the morning. Like I took some of those. But my very first job was like the second day I moved out here because a friend of mine was like, we need a production assistant.
Sure.
So I worked on a Jamie Kennedy prank show.
Okay.
In 2006. And I think it was called Blowing Up. And I got to set, and my job was we were filming outside, and my job was to hold an umbrella over Jamie Kennedy because he was going to get sunburned otherwise.
Yeah.
And then also the only other thing I remember from that job is that I had to make a grocery run to get a jar of pickles for somebody because they wanted pickles. So very glamorous. I was like, oh my God, I got this job in Los Angeles right away. Congratulations. And that's what I was doing.
Yeah, I was just talking with a production friend of mine, and we're sharing our experiences being caught by paparazzi. And mine is holding an umbrella over Kristen Bell on Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So yeah, I've been.
Oh
there.
my
Yeah.
God, that is one of my favorite movies.
Oh no way!
Yes, and my movie is we took a lot from that, I would say, like because we thought that was one of the newer comedies rom-coms that we really loved, and we watched that and was like, how can we do this kind of thing?
That's awesome. That's really cool. And Jason Segel and of course Nick Stoller are just wonderful people to work with too. So hopefully you can chat with them sometime if you haven't yet. Because
I saw Jason Segel on the street one time, and I was like, hey, Jason Segel. He's like, hey, and that was it. So he was just walking around in Culver City.
There we go. As he does. So you eventually get to work your way into the writer's room and kind of work up that ecosystem. Let's talk about that journey a little bit. What was your first step towards working within the world of writing?
My first job on Scripted, which is where I wanted to be, I started in reality and live events, was working as an office PA on a pilot, and I got let go at the end of it. They were staggering the production assistants, and they're like, we're going to pick out of a hat whoever is first, like, guess to like, it was like, an extra week or two at work. Of course, it was me. But the production coordinator felt really bad and was like, I'm going to try and find you another job. I was like, that's nice. So she got me an interview as a writer's PA on Hannah Montana.
Okay.
Which I didn't know what it was at the time.
Sure.
Now I do. But I ended up getting that job. And that was one of the best job experiences I ever had. It was such a fun show. It was it was exciting for me. It was getting my foot in the door in the writer's room. And also very luckily for me, and I know this isn't the situation on everyone's first job, the two writers assistants that were working on the show were getting scripts already, and they were older. So they actually wanted me to be at the keys. They wanted me to be in the room. And so that was just incredible training that I was able to get. And I was even able to pitch some stuff that got in. And that was really cool. It was great. I mean, my actual job as the writer's PA was to get coffee and print scripts, like, and distribute them. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
But you know, when you get in there, hopefully you are in a welcoming environment and have people that want you to learn and succeed, and they're writers and writers assistants. I was very lucky to have that. And I was really young at the time. So it was just great for me. And I was able to, from, you know, my experience being a writer's assistant on that show, I was able to get other writer's assistant jobs in the industry.
And so did you just, you know, night before finals binge as much of Hannah Montana as you could find, or did you kind of walk in totally blind?
I tried to, but I don't remember how I could do it, because it was like 2007 or something. So stuff wasn't that available. Like now, of
everything's
course,
streaming,
like
of course, yeah.
Sure, you can go online and get it. But I did watch stuff, and I remember thinking, because I was like, oh, it's a kid's show. And even when I was a kid, I never really watched kid shows. So I watched like Seinfeld and Cheers and Wings and things like that. Just like old sitcoms. And I remember watching it, and I was like, oh, it's pretty good. I was like, this will be fun. It wasn't as kid jokey as I thought it was going to be. So I remember watching a few. I was like, okay, this will be really fun. And then a lot of the writers that were writing on Hannah actually hadn't written on kid shows before. They wrote some of the older shows that I used to watch. That was like great for me, because then I could talk about all the shows that they wrote on.
Yeah. So what do you think that there's something that you learned, you know, at that job level, being an assistant in a writer's room? Would you be considered an assistant to the room, or for a specific writer, or a little both?
On Hannah, I was a production assistant. I was for the writers, so whatever they wanted, which wasn't very much. Like I said, coffee, and although coffee in Hollywood is not fun. Yeah, trying to find parking and getting like 20 coffees and stuff isn't fun. But for other, I was never an executive producer assistant, so I was never an assistant to a writer. I never did any of that. I was always either a writer's production assistant or a writer's assistant for the room, where I was in the script, taking notes, sort of thing. And then when I was a script coordinator, when you're a script coordinator in comedy, you are also a writer's assistant as well. So you're in the room taking notes in the script, and then you're also getting the script together, putting it out, and going to meetings and formatting it correctly and coordinating with departments and all that stuff. So there's a lot to learn in all of these things. When I was on Hannah, the most important thing for me to learn was story and how to break a story, because that was not something I'd ever, I mean, of course, like I had done it myself, but I'd never done it in a writer's room. And I think when you work in a writer's room as a writer's assistant, that's probably the most important thing that you'll ever learn. And that's almost the only place to learn it, I would think. At least learn it well, because you're doing it so much. And yeah, I mean, jokes and when to pitch and things like that are all obviously really important, but definitely story breaking was something that is an invaluable thing you'll get in a writer's room.
Yeah. Is there something very specific about that you take with you? And we can get into some nitty gritty type of thoughts on story here. So a lesson that you learned in an early writer's room that changed the way you thought about things, maybe.
I think I learned on some shows that you could spend a few days trying to break a story. I mean, and then throwing stuff out that it's not working. It's also like what makes a good episode of television. And you never know. Sometimes it seems like a great story and the script seems great. It doesn't come out very well. And sometimes the opposite. So it's kind of like why there's a great movie that someone makes and then it's like they can't do it again, or a great TV show. There's just so many different parts of it, the writing, the acting, the directing, the story, everything like that. And I think it's sort of, I remember there was one story on Blackish that I was like, this is a great story, and actually ended up being one of my favorite episodes. But it's not always the case where like a great story turns out. But that's definitely the most important part. And I think spending time in the story breaking, spending more time in the story breaking is going to help you later on, because then you don't get stuck in different places in the script, because you would have thought everything out. And I think that's probably, what I learned is that when you're breaking the story, you've thought of like every iteration of that story and why this does and doesn't work. So yeah, we just spent an inordinate amount of time doing that.
Writers' rooms alone, I could probably talk to you for at least an hour on. And I love that world. But let's talk about you now moving up that ladder, and now you're a writer on a show. Were you ever like a staffed writer, or were you somebody that would jump in? Okay.
That's why I would say I was semi-successful. So
Okay.
I was never staffed on a show. I got a freelance script on Hot in Cleveland. When I went to work on Hot in Cleveland, I was really excited because I'd been on these unsuccessful shows forever, and I was finally going to be in a successful show. And then halfway through, they're like, yeah, this is the last season of a show. I was like, okay, great. So my streak continues. Luckily, we did 20 plus episodes, and I was lucky with my writer's assistant Jess, who I had worked with on. We've been a writer assistant together on like a few different shows. We were able to get a freelance script, and then it was turned out great. But great, it's just an awesome feeling, your first show, and also like the way that room was constructed in a multicam room. This happens, I don't know, maybe half the time or maybe even more. You're either like room writing it, where you're all together writing the script, or you break out different scenes. So Jess and I had the Betty White, Stacy Keach scenes.
Oh, wow.
Because we really wanted them. And
Sure.
it was our script. So we wrote and that was like the best, because I was like, oh man, this is like what could be better. Like my first script, and I'm writing stuff for Betty White that she's going to say. So I was able to get a freelance on that show, and Suzanne Martin, who created Hot in Cleveland, created Crowded, and because she knew that I did a good job on the Hot in Cleveland script, she was able to give me a freelance on that, which isn't so expected on a first year show. So I was kind of surprised that I was able to get one. I mean, I asked for it, because when you're a writer's assistant, you've been working. Yeah. I asked, I was like, can I get one? Sure. And I did that. And then when I was on Blackish, I was working as a script coordinator there as well. I was working as a script coordinator on all these shows. I worked as a script coordinator on Blackish, and on season 2 of the show, I was able to get a freelance there also. So I was never able to get staffed on a show. When that season of Blackish was ending, I had a choice to come back and get another script as a script coordinator, or go and do the scriptation thing, which at that point was taking off. And I'd been a script coordinator for a while, and I felt like there was nothing more I could do, and I'd proven myself. So I decided to pursue scriptation, still writing on the side, features and things like that. And I have no regrets about that whatsoever. Yeah. I very likely would have been staffed on Blackish maybe the following season or the season after. But it was just a better, it was, I look back, it was the only decision that I could have made for myself and for the company. And plus I'm still able to write, movies and things when I want. So.
Right. Yes. So this is, you provided 2 great segues there. One towards scriptation. But first, I was actually just about to ask, were you doing your own writing on the side, even while working on these shows?
It's so hard to do that.
Yeah.
Because you're working all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the trap that a lot of people get in, because being a script coordinator or writer assistant is really, it's the hardest job. And I don't think any writer who has done this would tell you otherwise. Being a writer's assistant is the hardest job in the writer's room.
Yeah.
When you're a writer, you get to kick your legs up on the table in the room, and you know, you get to pitch ideas, and then you get to go home. And but being a writer assistant, you're just on the keys, concentrating all the time, figuring out pitches. I mean, it's hard, and it's not. And also, being a writer assistant does not equate to being a writer either, or being a script coordinator does not equate to being a writer. They're like two kind of different skills, like being a showrunner and a writer too, or two like a little different skills. It's hard because you're you know, first one there and then the last one to leave, and then you're so exhausted you just don't want to look at a screen again.
Right. Sure.
So when I was younger and I was doing this, I had a lot more energy and I had a lot of time and less responsibility, and maybe I was able to do that on a weekend. I wrote a spec one time, like in 3 days of an existing show. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe because I know better, or maybe that wasn't very good. Yeah, there's just not a lot of time to do that, and it's just so exhausting. So it's like that's a lot of the battle. It's great to be an assistant and working on a show, difficult to find time to write your own stuff.
So when were you working on the list?
The list was an idea that a guy I went to school with had a grade school. Like, we were kids, we played a baseball little league together. We had this idea in actually 2008 or 2009, something like that, where, you know, we thought, wouldn't it be funny if someone actually slept with a person on their free pass list? Because the whole idea of the free pass list is that it's a free pass, you're allowed to do it. But what if it happened, you know, the other person wouldn't be so happy about it. So we had this idea years ago, and it was something that we were just sort of like writing on and off for fun.
Sure. Okay.
And you know, at some point when I was off, either in between jobs or when I was off Blackish, we started like really working on it more seriously and trying to get it out there. And I obviously had learned so much from working in writers' rooms and on story and jokes, comedy, and all that, that we there were like literally hundreds of versions of this script.
Sure.
And it was originally written about a guy pursuing a list, and we ended up gender swapping it a few years ago.
That was actually going to be my next question. That I was going to be female led, but okay.
Yeah. So then, and that helped it get made for sure. Yeah, it was just sort of this on and off thing that, like, I wouldn't recommend doing. I wouldn't recommend working on something for 15 years. I mean, go on and work on another project. But my friend, to his credit, was so persistent with this. And we eventually got it to someone who liked it and was like, I think I could get this made. And he did.
That's just that easy.
Yeah, exactly.
I assumed you were pitching it around for a long time as well, while you were, you know, continuing to polish.
Not so much. Having worked on a bunch of shows that got canceled, I had a bunch of different writer friends, but I really hate asking for favors. And I hate asking for reads, and that's probably something I need to be better at. I just don't want to inconvenience people. So the connection actually, of course, I knew this was going to happen, came from my friend who is not in the business. And he ended up getting it to the producer, who I think he had such a low expectation, like, oh, some random guy sending me a script, I'll read it as a favor. And he found it really engaging and really funny, because, I mean, hopefully it was, but and this is something, I mean, you know, Scriptation runs a script contest, and something I really want to emphasize in that is the first few pages. If it's a comedy, you got to have jokes on page 1. You have to keep the reader interested. Also, lots of white space, lots of dialogue, unless you're doing a short or a genre thing like that. But especially for a comedy, I was like, we have to hit with joke. We got to get him in. So we ended up having a first few pages that I thought was really good, and that didn't end up making it into we ended up rewriting that, but it was an attention grabbing first few pages. And when you're writing, you basically build credit in those first few pages. So if you start off really strong, you spend like 90% of your script time there, then you will get a lot of credit for, let's say, subpar story that's going to come later, or jokes, because they know that you're a competent and smart writer in those first couple pages. So we had a really solid first couple of pages, and I thought just a really great first act. And the second act and third act needed work. I still felt it was good, but like I thought that was really strong. And I think that's what ended up really helping get it made. And especially with that producer, is like, oh, this could be really fun, and I like this concept, and I'm hooked at the beginning. And once we got that, it's okay, now the rewrite process starts and all that. But yeah, I mean, I can't believe it got made. I know how hard it is to get a movie made. And this was very hard. The whole process of getting the movie made, it was an insane process, but we did it, and it's coming out. And yeah, I know, like, I have issues with parts of it. You know, being a film writer, it's not like being a TV writer where you get creative control over stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
You're sort of like pushed to the side.
Yeah, he just kind of watch the train leave the station without you a little bit.
Yeah, and I kind of learned, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to get another project going, I will either be very involved in maybe directing a feature, or I will write the script and then I never want to see or hear from it again. Sell it and then be done with it.
Well, that's the thing. It's just getting it out there is such a big deal. And this seems like the type of a movie, you know, comedies kind of famously are not doing great as films now, but romantic comedies are the one that actually can, not a guarantee, but that's the one that can carve out a niche and find an audience at this current stage, because I think so much other comedy is really good on TV, but romantic comedies, so far at least, they're still holding as a marketable entity. And I do have to just shout out, you have Halston Sage as your
she was
lead.
Unbelievable.
And
unbelievable.
Any fan of the Orville will recognize her face immediately, which I'm a nerd like that, so I'm totally down. I can't wait to see this movie, which comes out August 22nd, right?
August 22nd, yeah.
Very, very cool. So yeah, let's get into it's such a natural and interesting progression that, you know, you were working in writers' rooms at different levels and obviously having to coordinate ideas and changes throughout. So it makes sense that you would find a world that, boy, there should be a software that helps my job. But it's also not common for somebody to say, I'm going to go from being a writer to working in the tech industry. And you kind of are doing both of those things here. So let's talk about your dive into scriptation, and how do you what's step one for getting into a whole different universe?
Yeah, look, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a programmer. I'm just probably like a techie computer nerd, like a bunch of people, especially my generation. And I was working as a script coordinator on a show, and like you said, I was the one that was putting out the script revisions and script changes, and there was, you know, I was always noting, like, this is a problem, right? You put out a script, people take a bunch of notes on it from all departments, and then you put out a completely either full draft or revised pages, and then there's this process of collating script pages and rewriting your notes. So everyone knows that that's just an annoying hassle that everyone has to go through. Right. When I was working on this one show, it was super obvious to everyone, because every single night we were putting out a full draft of a script. So it wasn't just like getting, you know, revision pages, like a blue packet that's 5 pages. It was like a full 50-page script. And it was, you know, going to 100+ people. And so I would, and being the script coordinator, even though I wasn't the writer making the changes, I felt a bit of responsibility in printing the script and then handing it to the writer's PA to then destroy the environment.
Yeah.
So the iPad had come out maybe like a year or two before, and I think the Kindle was out at the time. And I was saying, why aren't people moving to digital? And the reason is because you sort of run into the same problem, right? You make all your notes digitally, and then you'll get another draft. And then how do you get those notes that you've made on the first draft over to the other draft? So that was the problem I was trying to solve. So I posted on Facebook, and my post was, does anyone know an engineer that can build an app about PDFs or something like that, right?
Sure.
I didn't know anything. And I got connected with, it was sort of like right place, right time, right guy, with this, my CTO, Felipe, who had just moved here from Chile, who was going to college at UCLA and had time to start working on stuff. And I had some money that my brother had lent me to get an engineer, and it was like very cheap at the time. Like I did get pricing for this, and it was like, just to get a 1.0 version, it was like $150,000 from my company. It was like, I'm poor, I can't do any of this, but like maybe my brother can like lend me some money and we could get this going. And the idea was a simple idea, right? And then could we execute it? So the whole thing was, can we move notes from one PDF to another PDF in an intelligent way? And Felipe was like, I think we can, let me try it. And then I still remember we were at a Starbucks in Westwood, and he showed it to me for the first time. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe we did this. I think we really have something here. And we, it grew organically. It wasn't like a tech startup with a bunch of money. It was a bootstrapped company. We eventually had a friends and family funding round, and it was just like with a bunch of the writers that I had worked with that had a lot of money that could, put some money into it. But yeah, we just sort of, it was bootstrapped. We launched it in the App Store in 2016 for $10 to download. And then we eventually went subscription, because that's the only way to survive in this, with having an app. We went subscription in 2018, and that's sort of when we became a real company, because we were able to offer a bunch of more advanced things that people wanted. And it sort of just took off because it's a very demonstrable thing on set. I mean, imagine you're on set, the PA comes down with, let's say, 10 revision pages. People are, collating their script with their binder. And then you have one guy that hits a button, they transfer their notes, it takes 2 seconds, and they're ready to go. So they're like, oh, what did you do? And then we get some people we got, a few converts on that show. And then the thing that was always so bad for me, which was a show getting canceled, is actually, I'm not going to say that, but it's like a good thing for Scriptation, because those like 5 people, then 2 people work on that show and 1 people work on that show. So it was like the worst thing that like almost made me go homeless from my shows getting canceled. And now I'm like, oh, Scriptation, it's like kind of a benefit, because people then move around to other shows and spread the word. But the show should never get canceled.
Never.
Every show should go on forever for the end of time, and everyone should be employed and have jobs.
I'm still waiting for Cheers to come back. Since you mentioned it earlier.
I know. Where's that reboot? Frasier. Right? There's a Frasier reboot coming, so maybe.
And so that was going to be the question: is like, how do you disrupt an industry? And very just over time, organically, is the answer.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it takes a while, and there are some big players in the industry too that are going to like come at you, but you just have to build. You have to build something that people want, that's actually going to save them time, because it is so hard to get people to change the way they do things too. But I did a lot of research, and before we did anything, I interviewed a bunch of people in a bunch of different departments. And my first question was, would you go digital? And it skewed like the younger people were more likely to, and the older people were like as likely to. But then I said, well, what if we could transfer your notes? And every single person was like, if you can do that thing, then I will learn the software, because that's going to save me a bunch of time. So it has to work. And we were just, Scriptation was just at this DGA live DGA event for the live event people. And we met a lot of users, and they they would say to us, like, you guys like, I can't believe you guys advertise as doing a thing like transferring notes, and then it actually works. Like, that's it's like, you do the thing that you say you're going to do, and it saves me a bunch of time. And that was something we came up with years ago, and it's like, yeah, that is the core of our business, and we're just going to keep improving it and doing other things. But it's really cool to have a benefit for a person on a show. And we one of the biggest things we ever worked on was Game of Thrones. And we were told because we actually did some custom things for them, and when we were talking to them, they said Scriptation saved us. We literally had over 100 revisions on a script. They said that is not an exaggeration. I'm not saying literally, like, incorrectly. It is over 100 versions of a script, and Scriptation saved us. Wow. So to have that kind of impact on a show is very cool. I will say at the same time, when you're a script coordinator, there's a burden of putting out the script, and there's mistakes on the script and whatever. And when I left that, I was like, oh my God, I don't have to do that again. And now I run Scriptation. And if there's a bug in Scriptation, now I've got this entire industry being like, wait a minute, I can't do this thing that I did. So I sort of amplified the script coordinator guilt and that you have by a magnitude of 10,000.
Yeah. But you mentioned it earlier, the environmental impact of it too. I mean, imagine Game of Thrones, 100 revisions, 100 plus revisions, and then that each revision is going out to how many people on a show of that scale? That's a lot of paper.
Yeah. And when I was working on, and anyone will tell you that when you go to a table read, the thing that is so frustrating about going to a table read is that everyone has scripts already. Yet there are extra scripts at the table. There's scripts like in front of the table with highlighters, and then there's that extra 15 scripts in case people haven't gotten one, like 2 of them get taken. So it's just like an insane amount of and that's just scripts like never being touched.
Right.
Waste of time, waste of energy, environmental impact, all of that. Yeah, I mean, to date, Scriptation's prevented millions and millions of sheets of paper and thousands of pounds of CO2. And I think the environmental impact is just beyond paper. And we talk about this sort of a lot internally at the company, which is, yes, it's a paper savings, but it's an ink savings, it's a toner savings. You don't have to use brads, you don't have to use electricity, you don't have to transport the paper. Also, colored paper, which is like pink, blues, goldenrod, isn't as easily recyclable as white paper. So it's just beyond what you would think, and yeah, it creates a big impact. And I think whatever way people are coming at it, because we've certainly had people come at it from the environmental side of it, and people come at it at the productivity side of it, but it ends in the same place. So they're saving paper and they're being more productive. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Any place to save a little production budget is appreciated nowadays, with a lot of other exploding costs.
That as well.
Yeah,
paper is not free.
Right. And I'm guessing anytime you put out a new technology, people will start to find new ways to use it that you didn't even think of. Does that come about at all?
All the time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We never do enough for the customers. We can never do enough. It's we just put out a feature in beta for tagging, because a lot of people, we should have done it a while ago. People have been asking for it for years, but a lot of people are marking their scripts, essentially, highlighting different categories and elements in their scripts. And then they're going to a spreadsheet and retyping all that info out to, make schedules and things like that. So we never had a way to tag elements in Scriptation that could then go to a spreadsheet or a PDF. So we just released this feature in beta. We've been working on it for a while. We're really, really proud of it. And I mean, we've got the best beta testers too. And we're getting, I'm reading through the feedback on it, and it's like, I want to do this thing and I want to do that thing. And we're like, yeah, it's a good idea. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, we're in 1.0. We could put that like maybe in 1.0, 1.1, or maybe that's a 2.0 thing. But yeah, we get stuff from users all the time. We certainly have ideas on where we want to go business wise, and that's important to us in different segments and things like that. But our customers tell us what they want and what they want out of it, and they want more, and we want to give that to them in like a very scriptation way, because something that I'm really proud of with scriptation is we try and give everyone the tools to do what they want, because taking notes on a script is very personal to them. So we just want to, be a sandbox for them and allow them to do whatever they want to do. And that's why I think we've been so successful in being B2C, which a lot of businesses in the space aren't, frankly. I mean, they get these deals on shows or these deals at studios, which we do have some of those, but our core business is going direct to consumer. Like anyone could go and download Scriptation in the App Store for free and either start using it that way or upgrade to the advanced features. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the thing that's really made us successful, is that we're not bound by studio restrictions. We are customer focused, and we listen to them, and it's mutual. I mean, it goes back and forth.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that, because I was actually going to get to that next. That it's clear why this makes so much sense on a show that's in production. What about a writer that's not at that level yet? Is there use for scriptation for them, and how would they use it?
Yeah, look, if you write a script, you read a script. So
yeah,
Scriptation isn't a script writing software. It's a script reading and annotating software. From the professional writer use case, it's great in the room to mark up your scripts. It's great on set. When I was on set, I was able to make my own sides with my notes on them, which is something I hadn't even considered. It's like, okay, everyone's handing out sides. Well, what if your sides have your notes on? It's like the obvious, right? So that's great for the professional writer. For the amateur writer, I mean, you write your script and then you want to read it. Let's say you put it aside and you want to read it, and then you want to mark it up, and then you want to make changes. So it's really fast and helpful to do that. We've also had a lot of people send it back and forth between their agents and their managers. So we've had managers using Scriptation, sending notes in the script. A lot of people do coverage and things like that. As a writer, I don't really want coverage. I give my script to other writers, and other writers don't give you coverage. They write notes in the script, and they go through the script and they say, on page 3, I thought this. And that, I think, is really valuable feedback. So that's what a lot of agents and managers are doing when they're giving notes, and even just with friends. So I'll get friend scripts, I'll mark it up in Scriptation, and I'll send it to them. A really cool feature that is used in production, but also amongst writers, if you get a bunch of notes on a script from different people, we have our own file format, a Scriptation layer file. So you can actually, it's like Photoshop. You could turn on and off layers. So let's say I send my script out to 3 people and they annotate in Scriptation. I can actually view their notes on one PDF in different layers, which is really cool, because I can say, like, this is Bob's notes, this is Melanie's notes, and toggle them on and off, and where did they feel the same way? You can use it for free. You can use note transferring for free. You can read and do all the annotation tools, or I'd say almost all the annotation tools, for free. But it's good to get started going digitally anyway, even if you're not going to use Scriptation, because why are you printing scripts at home and then reading them? Keep a digital track of everything and make your own notes on it, and that'll be safe forever.
Yeah, and I got to say, as you mentioned at the beginning of this section, Kindle. I've tried highlighting and making a note on Kindle. I might as well be carving it into a tablet, a stone tablet. It is so hard to do. So I'm looking forward to playing around with this myself. And let's talk a little bit about now Scriptation is getting into, or maybe even has for a little bit. I think for at least 3 years now, you guys have been running screenplay contests. So let's talk a little bit about, as we always talk about on Just Click Submit, what is the specific unique goal of your contests?
So we're, one of the few contests that are writer founded. And I wanted to make a contest that is by writers for writers. And one of the unique things, and we talked about the annotating in a script, and I think we have a few sort of unique things that separate us from some of the other contests, but we provide annotated feedback, which is the feedback I want in a script.
Yeah.
So you can get Scriptation annotated feedback as a layer file or just as a PDF. You don't need to be using Scriptation. You could be using Adobe or any other software program. So when you enter Scriptation, you have the option to get annotated feedback. Another thing we do is this, every year we do a writer's roundtable. So we have anywhere between 15 and 25 finalists through all the categories. And we'll get some writers, feature writers. So we had Matt Keller last year, who wrote Night School, the Kevin Hart movie. Gina Ippolito, who was a TV writer, wrote on the Murphy Brown remake, or reboot, I should say. Jess Potter was on our panel last year. She wrote on Modern Family, also Blackish with me. So it was really cool. It was a really great chance for writers to engage and sort of learn some of the stories and how you break in and all that. So we offer that for the finalists. And another thing that we offer that is unique is, in Scriptation, we have a ton of users all over the world. And I thought it would be really great to connect the finalists with some of our users, which are directors and executive producers and actors. I mean, the other day we had an actor read a script and was like, I want to contact this writer. So, which is really cool. So we have a showcase section in the app where we promote the 15 to 25 finalists for a year in Scriptation, and they can put whatever contact info they want. And hopefully we make some good connections there. Additionally, the winners in each category get to meet with agents and managers, and we've had people develop. Lily Park, who was our grand prize winner a few years ago, ended up signing with Verve, I believe. And so she's big and successful now and is writing movies and things like that. But I know, a lot of contests have meeting with writers and executives, and we offer that obviously as well. But there are some of these other things that I thought would be really cool as a writer, because I won contests before, and then it was like, great. And then I had like no place to go. So we're trying to give people more connections to more people and more exposure out there. And I think it's been really fun. And I think you ask any of the people that have entered the competition and some of the finalists, I think it's a unique experience that we offer. And, hopefully this leads to some staffing and some more development and maybe some good feedback too.
And I just want to take a second here, because I know we get this through social media comments all the time recently, because there's just a lot of fear, I guess, when it comes to the strike of what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Screenplay contests, you're allowed to submit to them still. You're absolutely
you're allowed to write.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, write. You should be writing. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I think there's a big, I know people are very scared, and there's a big overreaction to certain things. I was around for the last strike. It wasn't like this. Yeah. I worked on a show in post-production with writers that were like doing stuff during the strike. Like, but that was 15 years ago. Now there's a lot of social media and there's a lot of streaming. But anyway, regardless of that, whether that was, okay to do or not, you can write. Writers can write. What we don't do, so during the strike, I'm sure you guys don't do this either, is we can't send the scripts to production company. So we won't do that. But once the strike is resolved, we will. As soon as that happens, we have people lined up, and that'll happen once the strike is resolved. But please, you can write. It doesn't preclude you from doing that. Writers Guild members like myself, we write. Get Final Draft, get whatever screenwriting software, and there's no better time.
It's all about the interaction with struck companies. That's what we can't cross the line for. So it's not talking to producers, production houses, studios, and that's not part of anything that should be going on right now, and definitely not part of this or what the ISA is doing. So just to make that, have to mention it because people will ask otherwise. And then I always like to try to give somebody a little bit of extra insight. Say, okay, I've decided I want to submit to one of your Scriptation showcases, which, by the way, you have separate ones for TV, comedy, and drama pilots, and a separate one for features and shorts. Currently open, as we're recording this, is the television ones. In November of this year is
I read all of those.
You read all of them. Okay, so exactly.
I do. I read the beginning of this, especially the ones that come in and we score them, and I read those.
So I guess for your own insight, you personally, and also whatever kind of instruction or notes you give to your judges, your fellow readers, um, what is something that would make a good scriptation highlighted script?
We have great judges for comedy and drama and shorts, and that's their expertise. My expertise, obviously, is in feature comedy and TV comedy. So I'm not so much looking for story and structure. That is a part of it. Of course, it can't just be insane. But I'm looking for getting me on the first page. I'm looking for jokes. I'm looking for pacing. I'm looking for good dialogue, things like that. Because I've read in other competitions what comedy scripts make it, and like they're not, let's say, not my cup of tea, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I want to laugh in the beginning, and that's what I instruct the readers too. And that's what a good comedy script. It's because I do think story can be taught and can be worked on, and if it ends up getting made and developed, that story is going to be beaten up and worked in all these different sorts of ways and workshopped and all that. But jokes, like if people like jokes and that's a good joke, that's going to stay in, unless it has to go for the story. But like those jokes are going to stay in. So that's what I'm looking for right away. And I want to be hit right up front with some funny jokes. I want to be hit with some good dialogue, and that's what makes a good comedy script.
So I wanted to actually ask you this earlier, because you mentioned that with the list that you were funny on page 1. How do you do that? Because so much of comedy is in context. In context, you understand the character or the situation. And if on page 1 you don't have a lot of time to establish that, what is your approach to being funny on the first page?
You have to stick to what you think is funny. I mean, not what somebody else thinks is funny. I don't know. It's different for each script, right? So it depends what kind of thing you're writing, but it doesn't need to. I would say, look, if you can get some hard jokes, which is like a punchline, laugh out loud jokes, great. That's not your style, fine. Then just give me some, back and forth dialogue. Give me an action line that I think could be funny. Don't save your jokes. Put it that way. Whatever you can do, like work on those first few pages. There's no like what is funny. I mean, that's a tough one, of course. Like it's subjective, but if you think you're funny, trust your gut, send it some people, see if they think it's funny, and just try and hit with a couple of jokes on the first few pages.
It is Scriptation, SCRIPTATION.com. You can find out a lot more information about the software. Also, you have classes on there for production use. You can find the screenplay contests over on the contest section of the ISA website, also networkisa.org. The list, funny comedy coming out this at the end of August here, August 22nd. Well, funny trailer at least. So you got that going for you.
Oh, yeah, I did like the trailer.
Good. Anywhere else you want to direct people, Steve?
You can download Scriptation in the App Store. Give it a try for free. Showcase.scriptation.com. You can enter the TV writing competition, open right now. I think that's all I got.